Good evening, individuals. It's Sap back again with a lovely news article that I just discovered. I really love these specific type of news articles. You know, we've reviewed in the past a Chinese man, a similar type of news article. A Chinese man who had a 10 or 15 centimeter nail in his forehead somehow penetrated his brain and he was still alive, even conscious. You know, that's just lovely. I mean, you would imagine if you had like right here, a nail, 15 centimeter, penetrated into your skull. It was a workplace accident, by the way. Probably his boss was not happy with his productivity and then decided to give him a fucking 15 centimeter nail in his forehead for Christmas. But yeah, you would guess that if you had a 15 centimeter nail penetrated, raw dogged in your skull, you would not stay conscious or, you know, maybe somehow stay alive but not be conscious. But let me review this news article. Because this is also somewhat similar to the 50 centimeter nail in your forehead. But let me read the headline. By the way, I actually need to finish my point. But I'm not a psychopath, serial killer, whatever the fuck. But I just somehow find it interesting, these news articles. And maybe I do actually need to check up for psychopathy or whatever they call it. If you like these specific types of news article. But they're always interesting. So the headline. Man who suffered headaches for 5 months learns he had chopsticks stuck in his brain. And always the question is, the first question people usually ask, which makes sense. How the fuck is it possible that you're not noticing that you have, first of all, how the chopsticks get into your brain? Because, okay, look, I didn't do too well in biology. I'm not going to assume that the chopsticks were inserted rectally and then ultimately got to the central nervous system, the brain. So the point is, you must have been consciously aware. And you must have seen it, how these fucking chopsticks ended up in your brain. Because my point was originally, even though yesterday it came out into the news that there was a sex tape filmed in the Congress in the US. And I'm pretty sure they fucking use some disgusting tools as well, maybe chopsticks. But I don't want to discuss this because it's disgusting, of course. And I haven't seen the sex tape in Congress, in case you're wondering, because I want to keep my sanity, of course. But Logan Paul had a movie night and watched it all night. But my point is, if you insert chopsticks in your behind, there's no way it's going to get to your brain. So this man, what the point was, how can he not have noticed that chopsticks somehow ended up in his brain? That's the first question people logically ask. But let me read it. It probably will say in the article. Oh, and actually, let me finish my point. I keep getting sidetracked. Major spastic alert. But yes, number one is how the fuck do you not notice it when the chopsticks get into your brain? Number two, how do you not immediately have symptoms? Okay, the headline says he suffered headaches for 5 months. But don't you have like a symptom of, like what the fuck, like audio hallucinations, visual hallucinations, you know, somebody tripping major balls on DMT, ayahuasca with a shaman who's walking around you with a lit candle, whatever they do it. Or I guess DMT is often smoked, but it can also be drinked in a potion from ayahuasca, which ultimately made, if you know that motherfucker on YouTube, Connor Murphy did ayahuasca once, I believe, and he turned it so fucking demonly insane that he started drinking his own semen. I don't want to talk about this, but that's just my point, how ayahuasca could fucking break your brain. But this man suffered headaches for 5 months. That's the only thing he suffered from the chopsticks in his brain? I mean, it depends, of course, where the chopstick ended. But if it stimulated certain parts of the striatum, I guess you would feel really good. And if it stimulated, I don't fucking know, certain parts of the insula, you might have certain hallucinations of taste. Which the Gaylord in Congress did not hallucinate, I'm afraid. But he did have something to taste. But the point I'm trying to make is obviously certain parts of the brain stimulated by the chopsticks, if you can call that stimulation, because it's not the same as putting an electrode in the striatum of rats. Or there's an experiment where they put electrodes in the brains of rats at certain places, and then the rats would self-administer that shock or that stimulation until they died of starvation. But nobody fucking cares. Let me just read the headline or the article, I guess. So, a man who suffered headaches for 5 months learns he had chopsticks stuck in his brain. So, this is the picture, of course. As you can see, this motherfucker snorted more nose candy than Mr. Hunter Biden because his nose is not really doing too great. Obviously, we know why. It's the chopsticks. CT scans of the unnamed. Again, why don't you want to have your name in this news article? It's the number one thing to put on your resume. You think I'm joking, but if you go to, let's say, a physical manual labor job, and your boss knows that you're the bloke who can withstand huge chopsticks lodged up in your brain, you'll do well on the work floor because you're impervious. Is that the right word? You're just indestructible. The chopsticks can ravage your brain and you're still working. So that's something you want your name out there. CT scans of the unnamed 35-year-old's head show the utensils penetrating up his nose and into his brain. He couldn't get chopsticks out of his head. And we're not talking about the piano tune. I have never heard of the piano tune either, but joke's on you, buddy. A man in Vietnam who had experienced severe headaches for 5 months was flabbergasted after discovering that he had a pair of chopsticks lodged in his skull. So, yes, it was penetrated, let me see, up his nose and into his brain. We still, of course, we're going to keep reading. We still don't know how the chopsticks ended up in his brain, penetrating his face, and how the guy didn't notice, And, just quick guess, there might have been alcohol involved. That's what I'm guessing. That's the only reason I would think of how you're unable to notice chopsticks getting raw dogged penetrated in your brain. You know what I'm saying? The unnamed 35-year-old patient had reported to the Cuba, by the way, you can get free penis implants. Google it. And no, I didn't visit it, and I'm not interested, but Brian Stelter did. The unnamed 35-year-old patient had reported to the Cuba Friendship Hospital in Dong Hoi on November 25th after suffering from the aforementioned headaches as well as fluid discharge and fluid loss, the Metro reported. Let me go ahead and guess. Maybe the chopsticks penetrated the spastic attack again. Posterior pituitary gland, because the posterior pituitary gland secretes human growth hormone, or human growth hormone, HGH, and ADH, antidiuretic hormone. By the way, no, so fucking retarded. The growth hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, is the anterior pituitary gland, but the posterior pituitary gland secretes oxytocin and ADH, or vasopressin. But the point I'm trying to make is antidiuretic hormone is antidiuresis, so anti-pissing, which is not optimal for Logan Paul's morning routine because he's into golden showers, the recipient. But the point I'm trying to make is if you stimulate with the chopsticks, and not just stimulate, but maybe destroy the posterior pituitary gland, it might just so happen that you no longer secrete ADH, so you no longer have the antidiuretic hormone, which means you're going to be pissing like crazy. And probably get a contract for the hub, because your talents might be used, again, on Logan Paul. There, doctors conducted CT scans which revealed that the man was suffering from tension pneumocephalus, a rare but potentially life-threatening neurological condition defined by a dangerous increase in intracranial pressure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's also with certain brain affections, of course, because certain brain affections with the cerebrovascular fluid could cause swelling, which obviously is an increase in pressure. And normally, in most cases, you don't want to fucking increase that pressure in your skull because you might damage the nerve tissue, of course. But in this case, it was not some infection, or could have happened after, but it was the main perpetrator in this case is the chopsticks shoved up in his brain. A subsequent examination revealed the unusual source of the man's symptoms, a pair of chopsticks that had reportedly penetrated up his nose and into his brain. So again, we still don't know how this man did not notice and how the chopsticks ended up in his brain, but right now I have another theory. Maybe he tried to, snort some nose candy, and instead of using his keys, he used the chopsticks because he just came from a sushi restaurant, and also snorted all the prokaryotic cells from the expired salmon in his sushi. He snorted fucking major salmonella. GG, kid. But no, maybe he didn't have a key, used his chopsticks to snort, and ended up snorting the whole chopsticks to the prefrontal cortex. Or whatever that ends up. But that's obviously not what happened. Dr. Naigayan van Mem, head of the Department of Neurosurgery, dubbed the case very rare. You would imagine so. A chopstick snorted up to the brain. Not snorted, we don't know, but yes, a chopstick penetrating your brain is not that common. Well, the man was initially flummoxed over how he ended up with eating utensils on his mind. He recalled that he had been involved in a fight 5 months ago while out drinking in Vietnam. Okay, so I got one part right, and this was obvious, of course. There's no credit to give here, because obviously he was hammered literally with the chopsticks in his brain, but also with alcohol. Because if you don't notice the chopsticks penetrating your brain and getting all types of symptoms, including what he said, massive fluid loss. And again, it's also masked by the alcohol, because this is an interesting thing, what I just told you about the posterior pituitary gland. What inhibits ADH release is alcohol. Google it, motherfucker, and nobody cares. But that's why if you piss one time on alcohol, you're gonna piss insanely much the entire night. This is what everybody knows. Piss one time, you go piss like crazy. And part of the reason why in general you piss more on alcohol is because alcohol inhibits the release of ADH, antidiuretic hormone. So there you go. But because he suffered the neurological symptoms like crazy pissing, so he might have thought at the time it was due to alcohol. The patient didn't remember many details from the brawl. Maybe it was the bloke I just reviewed today, the news article of a man who was bare knuckle street fighting. He got his ear bitten off, Merry Christmas, and he put it in a pickle jar. Maybe this bloke also got his ear bitten off, and maybe that bloke put his ear in his brain to compensate for the chopsticks. The patient didn't remember many details from the brawl, only that someone had stabbed him in the face with an unknown object. He probably would remember that, yes. However, when he reported to the hospital following the incident, doctors didn't find any chopsticks or abnormalities with his nose. In retrospect, the bemused patient believes that he had been stabbed up the schnosh with the foot forceps, which then sat undiscovered in his skull until now. So, okay, I told you before, it must have been alcohol involved, right? If you don't notice that how fucking chopsticks get lodged up into your nose, ultimately reaching your brain, you must have been so fucking hammered. But still, do we believe this story? Did he not just lie and he wanted to do a massive line of Parmesan cheese? Well, I guess you don't need, of course, a key or a chopstick to do that, but maybe he was doing a bump of Parmesan cheese, Hunter Biden's Parmesan cheese, and then he accidentally snorted the chopsticks all the way up his nose to his brain, because if somebody stabs you in the face with a chopstick, how the fuck do you not remember? Well, he did now, but that was after deducting and then coming up to the conclusion. But he didn't just straight up said, okay, I got stabbed in the face with a chopstick. How the fuck do you not notice it, even if you're so drunk? There must have been, I don't know. Thankfully, doctors were able to remove the chopsticks via endoscopic surgery through the nose. Well, I hope you got an extra prostate exam with it as a bonus. The chopsticks that had been lodged in the man's skull for 5 months. This is, okay, so I didn't realize it at first, but these are the actual chopsticks that got to his brain, penetrated his brain. Through the nose, apparently. That's the leading theory detective. That's actually what they think now. That he got stabbed in the face with the chopsticks. In his nose somehow. Because, especially if you're fighting somebody, I don't have experience with bare knuckle street fighting or, eating bat soup and then stabbing somebody in the face with a chopstick. But how the fuck if your face is like this, how the fuck you stab somebody, but how does it come like this, up all the nose, up all the way to the brain? I mean, it's not even logical, but yes, it apparently happened. And then these two massive pieces of chopsticks. Even James Charles can't handle this in certain body cavities. But yeah, crazy. And you would wonder why you would get neurological symptoms if this is penetrating your brain. It's pretty crazy, though, by the way, how they managed to remove this shit. I mean, it's the 24th century. Holy fuck. Do not upload this video. Edit it out. It's the 21st century. This is some major Alzheimer's going on. I need more acetylcholine. By the way, not even joking. Donepezil, which is what Joe Biden is on, it's an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which is the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine and removes it from the synaptic cleft. It's used for dementia, but it's also seriously a medicine that people are using for cognitive enhancement and to some degree prevent neurodegenerative diseases. Because it's actually true that acetylcholine is so much involved in memory, attention, cognition. It's insane. So I might have to go on donepezil because I just said 21st century that we live in. Doi dua gay. They're fucking insulting me now? What is this? The man recalled being... I so fucking love it, by the way, when you try to select this shit and you get fucking this. I'm gonna break something. Another monitor. The man recalled being stabbed in the face, but didn't remember with what. And now he's saying, doi dua gay. Well, yeah, he got stabbed in the face with chopsticks ultimately, but let's end this video before it gets way too long. They then used microsurgery to seal the fistula. Fisting? An abnormal connection between the artery and vein in brain and spinal cord tissue. The patient is reportedly in stable condition and while he awaits discharge from the hospital. Well, this man definitely got discharged on in his face because he got stabbed in the face with chopsticks. Penetrated his brain and he didn't know. Interesting story though, but thank you all for watching.